Hey everybody, it's Jasmine, your brow expert. Thank you for joining me. So today's going to be about thin eyebrows again, because it's one of the hardest things to do, right? To try to get them a little fuller. So I'm titling this as the 3 most important areas. If you practice at these 3 areas, the rest, well, it just becomes a little easier. I've been shaping eyebrows for 25 years at the Anastasia Beverly Hills Salon, and some of you guys have come to get your brows shaped, trusting me with the eyebrows, so thank you. And so you get the best brow and you get some tips along the way. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, please stop by. And I'm also going to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. The subscription helps me to come out with content every week to show you guys all the things that I have learned through the years of shaping eyebrows, which I still find myself learning. It never gets old. I mean, everybody's different, even though there is a certain type of guideline. The before and after is always exciting for me. So I hope it's exciting for you as well. And of course, learn some tips too, right? So definitely pass this along with anyone that you know can benefit from these tips, right? So I try to make it as easy as possible. And this page is really mainly devoted to shaping because it is one of the toughest thing, I think, to I don't know if it's to master is the correct term, but definitely to try to get as best as you can. So the color is important, yes, but shape, if you get the shape, then everything else just ends up being a little easier. So that's why my brows are always going to look a little dark and just intense, because I have an old brow tattoo that I covered up with a concealer. So the colors are going to come off very dark and very stark. And I'll be using the powder on myself, but the model I'm going to show you, I'll be using a pencil. Pencils are usually better if you're learning how to do eyebrows, and it's easier to control. And this one's Brow Wiz. It's one of our most popular pencils at the Anastasia Beverly Hills salon and in all the retail stores as well, because it's really thin and it's, again, just easy to control. So just stick with me. Try to do this with me as well. And yeah, are you guys ready to see the model and how to get the brows fuller? So thin eyebrows, right? Who has thin brows like this? I think I might have over exaggerated my brows to be really thin, but that's okay. So I'm gonna first measure the front of the eyebrow. That is the first important thing you wanna do, because measuring is, just by doing the little measures that I'm going to show you, it really does cut your time. I mean, it doesn't feel like it would be, right? Because you have to measure and make your marks, but try to freehand, especially if you are learning. That just, to me, in my opinion, that just makes it a little bit harder, because you may have to backtrack and then erase or try to lighten what you just did. So try to make these little marks. You could always erase them a little later. So the front one is the pinch of the nose in a 90-degree angle right here. And I just make always like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch line here, okay? Yeah, you notice that it's now kind of in a little, I don't know, if would you call that like a diamond or corner box? I make these also outlines because it's just to add that fullness to where it's easier to fill them in, okay? So fullness to her. Now, when I always say full eyebrows, I don't mean these wide, boxy, what they call the boyfriend brows. I mean what's full for you and what matches you. Here's a second area, the arch. The arch, I think, is probably the trickiest part for a lot of us, right? Because I've had so many people say, why isn't our eyes open? I need to see what you mean by right at the pupil or the iris. It's also to just kind of protect their identity, but you're looking at me and look at my iris or the pupil. Now, the pupil is that tiny part, right? The iris is the larger part of your eyes. So I like to just kind of say in between the pupil and the iris. So, and her face is kind of in a weird angle. So it looks like it's right at the middle, but trust me when I tell you, it's more in an angle. So you're still using the pinch. You see it's right over the pupil, but closer to the iris, because I like my arch to be a little bit further out. Okay, so I make that little mark right there. That's important. Again, all of these little marks, these little lines are kind of like, I don't know, I guess like a 1/2 inch or just a tiny little line, enough to where you can see that line, right? You don't want a tiny little dot. Okay, so then here's the third line, which is where the brows end. So that's where you use the side of the nose, the corner of the eye, and that is where you know the brows end, right here. Now, this is an area, these two areas, I always say, you can adjust here and there. If you want more of a lift and a wing out, the arch would be further out, closer to the iris right here, right? So I always say in between. I like to say in between the iris and the pupil. The ends, if your skin is already sagging, like mine, we're all getting there, right? Or your eyelids just, your brows just kind of fall down. You want to adjust and not make it so long, the ends that is. So by keeping a tiny bit shorter, you get that kind of lift there. So keep that in mind as well. So the measurements and the guidelines are important, but it's there so you can adjust accordingly. But so there you go. I still make that little, let me make that little kite here. And why am I calling it a kite? I don't know. But you could see right on me just that little square edge right there. Okay, so in between that lower and the middle area, see that line I just made? If you go below that area, so it's all about connecting the lines, connecting the dots. Here it's the lines, right? So it's making those two lines up in the front, and then it's making that outside line. So here you go, the 1, 2, 3, the 3 most important areas. So if you get these little outline areas, then the rest should be fairly easy. Yeah, easy peasy, right? And keep in mind that a lot of it is just not heavy pressure. If you find yourself to be heavy-handed, move your pencil or brush further back, not all the way back, but further back, and just keep telling yourself to press lightly. Okay, so you see that box up in the front? I'm going to go up here first. I'm going here, and then I'm going right up to that top right there in that line. Then I'm going to go at lower right here, and I'm just going in an angle, reaching for that lower part of that second arch mark right down here. Now mine is not going to be as perfect and clean as hers, but you know what? That's okay, because you're looking at the model, right? But you're also seeing me hold the brush or the pencil. This is also a tip that I just want you to remember, because how I hold is something that I might want you to try out yourself. Or I want you to try out yourself, not might, want to. Okay, so, and keep in mind that all the products are by Anastasia Beverly Hills. I will list them, as you can see, and I will tag them. So sometimes the products are not all in the tag, but this is why I'm listing them. Okay, so this is the easy part, right? You just fill inside the eyebrows. Don't forget up here, I made that little outline on the outside. Forgot to do that on myself. So this part is actually very important. So see that square front here? I didn't mean to just leave it that way, right? Because we want the front to be more natural. So right up in the front, I did that little circle in the middle of that line. That just breaks that hard edge. And if you push it out right up in the front, now mine's gonna look a little too far close because I'm trying to really show you all the dark outlines, which is why I'm saying mine's gonna look a little crazy. If you place a little dot in the middle of that straight line, you really cut that kind of harsh square look. So try that out if you haven't already. Okay, this is what I'm saying, the easy part. You're just feeling inside inside the outline, okay? So just very lightly. You can always add and press harder if you need to. So I'm going inside. Now you can see how dark the color is, right? So here I'm actually using powder now on her, and I'll tell you why I'm doing that. The powder is going over the pencil, right? Because her brows are thin and now she's going a little bit thicker, I am on her. I want the pencil to last a little bit longer. Pencils are made out of wax, so the heat of your body, if she's actually oily. So this will help keep the color on much longer when you pack on some of that powder. The powder is taupe, very light. It's not going to take away from her brow pencil color. It's just going to add to that kind of longevity, right? So mine's really white and full. But that's okay, you get the idea, right? So the powder is a great idea to go over the pencil. So that way you just keep it'll just help keep the color on much longer. So I find that if you use the pencil and powder together, I find that always works, almost always. So if you have the powder and the pencil, try both if you haven't done that. So here's something that I almost always do, is apply the highlighter over and under the eyebrows. I'm really gonna need mine with this because it's so wide and crazy. So, and the spoolie brush. Spoolie brush is always important because you want to just kind of go over it and blend and lighten. So I'm going underneath. I'm using the brush 18 because that's something that I will probably always will use, because you really get it close to the eyebrows without having to use your finger. You can if you want though. And there you go. You're just going. Now, when you go around the eyebrows with the highlighter, you tend to just show it off. And here's a brush where it's just so easy. Look at this. Without any much effort. Here you can press hard. It does not matter. But you don't want to go too far into the brow line, of course. But this, look how polished and nice it looks from that little messy kind of look I made earlier. This is what I mean by so important, right? And the spoolie brush, you guys, the front, that little dot I made, I want to comb it through just to tone everything down. Mostly combing up in the front, but don't comb too light, too dark, or too heavy. And you want to use the brush 18 again to just kind of go over it here and underneath here. And that way, it just keeps getting cleaner and cleaner, because when you comb the eyebrows to make it blend and you have mostly skin, because remember your brows were a little thin, the color might spill in and around the eyebrows and you're like, it's not as clean and sharp as I initially wanted. That's why you want to just keep this handy and just go around the eyebrows. Now I'm using that brow gel on her, right? The brow gel is also important because she does have a little bit of hair, so that will just kind of show it off a tiny bit, add a little bit of fiber. But it's the third thing that you can do to keep the color on that much longer. And when it moves the hair around, you might see some gaps. That's when you just go back with the Brow Wiz or the powder and just fill in some gaps if you see some gaps. Look at this before and after. Now, this is dramatic. She doesn't have to do this all the time. You know what? This is a really good look to maybe get put on if you want something a bit more dressier. So yeah, you don't have to do this all the time, but the shape is really pretty. And that is what I want you to see. And you know what? You can probably have it a little bit thinner. You don't have to go as wide as this. And if you notice, I'm going to point this out. If you notice her eyebrow, there's not really a thick and a thin area. It's not like full and then it gets tapered thin like a balanced brow typically is. Her brows actually almost have an even thickness from front to end, right? And right over here to the end of her eyebrows, or middle to the end, it's kind of slightly on the wider side, almost the same width as the front, when the front's supposed to be actually wider. So that's why on the after, you can really see that hair just kind of comb sideways, which is why I love the brow gel. Even if you have a little bit of hair, it just makes a nice difference. So I hope this tip helped you. Please let me know if it did. Definitely subscribe, because again, that just tells me, or tells YouTube, that you like this content, that you have gotten some tips. And yeah, thank you so much for the comments. I try to answer them. It's been really crazy, but I would try to get to them as much as I can. Thank you for your time, and I will see you guys right back here.